On May 17, 2017, in a wealthy suburb in Houston, Texas, a utility worker knocks on a man's door to inform him of a power outage. With their AC going out, the occupants of the house decide to drive away to someplace else to avoid the Texas heat, blissfully unaware that the man they just spoke to was actually an undercover DEA agent. Several DEA agents storm the unoccupied home and begin a search. It doesn't take long to find what they're looking for. On the property, they find 2,000 grams of fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamines, enough drugs to kill over 300,000 people. Along with these substances, they find several illegal firearms and computers logged onto the dark web marketplace, Alphabay, confirming what the DEA already knew. After a year of searching, the DEA had finally caught one of the dark web's biggest drug kingpins.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Alaa Muhammad Allawi was just 13 years old when the U.S. invaded his home country of Iraq. Alaa was too young to understand what was going on, but by the time he was 18, he realized he could use the invasion to his advantage. Allawi knew much more English than most of his peers, and the U.S. was seeking out local translators and guides. So on his 18th birthday, Allawi applied to be an interpreter for the U.S. Army, with the goal of saving his earnings so that one day he could go to medical school. Allawi was hired and stationed at Rashid Air Base, where he would be paid $1,350 per month, a good salary for the region, but not enough to satisfy Allawi's ambition. So he began looking for other revenue streams. That's when he noticed that many of the U.S. soldiers on the base were juicing and began selling them steroids to make some extra cash. This was Allawi's first foray into the drug business, and he had a knack for it, earning good money and a reputation that would get him fired when his superiors caught wind of his side hustle. This didn't stop him, however, as he was soon hired by an American contractor, ECOM, and stationed in Camp Taji, where he would meet a lifelong friend and future criminal co-conspirator, 25-year-old Marine Eric Goss. While stationed at Camp Taji, Allawi also discovered his passion for coding, quickly teaching himself the skill and using it to design several apps and expand his income stream. According to Goss, Allawi even used his coding skills to hack their boss's email. In 2013, a year after the Iraq War ended, Allawi realized that a man with his skills could make a lot more money in the U.S. So Allawi wasted no time in applying for a special visa and moving to Houston, Texas, to live with his friend Eric Goss and start the next stage of his life.
Federal agents shut down an illegal website known as a billion-dollar marketplace for narcotics.
Focusing on a dark web marketplace known as the Monopoly Market.
And this is against the dark web marketplace Alphabay.
A network of thousands of websites.
Drugs, guns, counterfeit cash, it's all for sale on the so-called dark web.
Allawi's move to the U.S. had a rocky start. He began his journey at the University of San Antonio, driven by his dream to attend med school and become a doctor, but this would prove a difficult prospect. His savings quickly dwindled, forcing him to rely on food stamps and a minimum wage job to cover his college expenses. Allawi was strapped for cash, but he had a solution. Much like the American bases he lived on, drugs were quite popular on college campuses. So he and his roommate, Mohammed al-Salihi, began to deal pills on the campus. But as their operation grew, Allawi realized that dealing drugs was a highly profitable career and far easier than going to med school. So in 2014, he dropped out and became a full-time dealer. But this new line of work had its own risks, as Allawi would learn in January of 2014, when he and al-Salihi were pulled over in a car that was carrying their product. The cops found 1 gram of cocaine, 10 Adderall pills, and 100 Xanax pills. The pair were arrested and faced up to 20 years in prison. But because Allawi had no priors, he got off with a slap on the wrist. This run-in with the law would deter most from a life of crime, but this only made Allawi change tactics. Dealing in person was inherently risky, but a whole new type of marketplace had emerged online, one that would allow Allawi to deal anonymously and to a much wider customer base. Below the surface internet we are all familiar with lies the dark web, an area of the internet that cannot be accessed through normal search engines and provides a level of anonymity that often attracts criminal enterprises. The dark web hit national headlines in October of 2013 when authorities shut down the Silk Road, an infamous online drug marketplace. This left a massive power vacuum and inspired many copycat sites. One of these being Alphabay, a website that would grow to be 10 times as popular as the Silk Road. It was this website that Allawi decided to deal on after hearing about it from a coworker. So Allawi set up an account under the username Dopeboy210 and began selling on the platform. He quickly recognized the site's potential. No longer confined to dealing on his college campus, he could now anonymously reach a global customer base. Sales on Alphabay took off, prompting Allawi to expand his business. He purchased 2 pill presses from eBay and mixed meth and fentanyl acquired from Alphabay to produce counterfeit pills, which he labeled as Adderall or Xanax, and sold to buyers unaware of the potentially lethal consequences. Allawi didn't care about how dangerous these pills were, as the potent high they provided kept customers coming back for more. Allawi's business quickly became more than he could handle alone, so he enlisted the help of several friends to aid in his operation, including the Marine he befriended in Iraq, Eric Goss. He also purchased more expensive pill presses, capable of producing thousands of pills a day, which helped him keep up with the ever-increasing demand for his product. To avoid drawing attention to their expanding enterprise, Allawi and his cohorts began spreading their package drop-off locations all over Texas. What started as 2 immigrants selling pills to pay for their college expenses was now turning into a drug empire. Allawi was making more than he ever could have as a doctor, all from the comfort of his home. And he was spending all this money as fast as he was making it. Luxury cars, expensive parties, designer watches, a brand new house, all the things he dreamt of having when he moved to the US were now his. But this lifestyle came at a cost, one not paid by Allawi, but instead by his customers. Overdoses began to spike at San Antonio University, and law enforcement was beginning to notice. A campus officer by the name of Hunter Westbrook began questioning students. Among all the names he heard, one kept coming up: Alaa Allawi, a former student who used to deal pills on the campus. This was beyond Hunter's pay grade, so he passed off this information to the San Antonio Police Department, who in turn informed the DEA, who officially began their investigation into Allawi in the spring of 2016. Allawi had been dealing on Alphabay for nearly 2 years and probably felt invincible at this point. But little did he know his new, extravagant lifestyle was about to come crashing down. The DEA began testing pills found at the scene of overdoses on the campus, and they found that many of them contained lethal amounts of meth and fentanyl. Furthermore, these pills matched the description that Allawi's former customers gave. The DEA had enough evidence to arrest Allawi, but before they could do so, an informant told them all about Allawi's dealings on the dark web and his Alphabay account, Dopeboy210. Upon looking at the account, the DEA realized this operation was much larger than they thought, and they expanded their investigation. They were no longer after a single dealer, but instead, an entire drug operation. The DEA used government-purchased Bitcoin to make a purchase of 500 Adderall pills from Dopeboy210. They were amazed by the ease of the process. With only a few clicks, anyone with an internet connection could buy thousands of dollars worth of potentially lethal drugs. Upon receiving the package, the DEA tested the pills and got the same results as the pills they found on campus. The DEA was now certain that Allawi was selling counterfeit pills and got a search warrant for one of Allawi's properties. While all this was going on, it was business as usual for Allawi. His sales continued to rise, and as far as he knew, the authorities had no clue about his operation. Allawi took care to stay anonymous. He knew if he used a cryptocurrency exchange to cash in his Bitcoin, that the IRS could use that to track him. So instead, he gave his Bitcoin directly to Kunal Kalra, a California man he met online, in exchange for cash. By the spring of 2017, Allawi had earned over $14 million on Alphabet. In 2 short years, Allawi had made more than most people do in a lifetime. But that was all about to come to an end. This brings us back to May 17th, 2017. The DEA execute their search warrant, sending an undercover agent posing as a utility worker to trick Allawi's associates into leaving the property, allowing several other agents to search the area. As the agents are shifting through the illegal substances and firearms they have discovered, Allawi's associates return and are shocked to see what is going on. They immediately call Allawi and frantically explain what they're seeing. The reality of the situation dawns on all of them. Their multi-million-dollar operation is now over. Driven by fear, Allawi and his associates immediately went into hiding, splitting up all across Texas. They even destroyed their smartphones and bought cheap burner phones to stay in touch with each other. Allawi began planning his escape from the U.S. He was going to flee to Mexico and catch a flight back to his home country of Iraq. He had been sending his family money for years and had plans to start a strip mall with them in Iraq. If he could pull this off, he would avoid any legal consequences and would return home with enough money to last a lifetime. But after a couple of weeks of hiding, Allawi and his associates had no interactions with police. They started to believe that they had gotten away with everything. To celebrate this, Allawi and his best friend Eric Goss went to a club. As the two of them partied one last time, they reminisced about their past life on the military base in Iraq and how much things had changed since then. On the ride home, Allawi told Goss he wasn't scared of the police and that if he was imprisoned, it would make him a martyr for helping his family. Only a few days later, Allawi would get his wish, when the DEA launched their final operation against him.
Up first at 6, a major player in the distribution of laced opioid pills is on his way to federal prison for 30 years.
Mohammed Allawi was sentenced in federal court here. A bit of poetic justice, Paul Venema reports, since the investigation that led to his arrest began here in San Antonio.
On May 25th, the DEA arrested Allawi and all of his associates scattered throughout Texas. They even arrested Kunal Kalra in California, the man who is buying Allawi's Bitcoin. This was the final nail in the coffin for Allawi's operation. When the case went to trial in 2019, Allawi pleaded guilty to charges of drug smuggling, manufacturing illicit substances, and money laundering. Ultimately, Allawi was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment and a deportation order to Iraq after his sentence was over, while his associates were sentenced anywhere from 5 to 10 years. In many ways, Alaa Allawi was not special. He was just a poor immigrant, drowning in college bills and working a dead-end minimum wage job. But he managed to create an online narcotics business and sell over $14 million worth of drugs on a dark web with nothing more than an internet connection. Shortly after Allawi's sentencing, the government launched an operation to close down Alphabet, putting a permanent end to the website.
Today, the Department of Justice announces the takedown of the dark web market Alphabet. This is the largest dark...
But this isn't the end of the story. Just like with Silk Road, many copycat sites have popped up to fill the power vacuum. The U.S. government has predicted that there are at least 40,000 illegal drug websites online at any given moment, a fact that is undoubtedly related to the spikes in fentanyl overdoses across the world. This is the never-ending cycle of the drug trade. For every drug dealer taken down, someone is there to take their place.